Finally, I could get back to my regular schedule of reviewing the crap that I just love to review. Well, what's on today's agenda? No, seriously, what's today's game? Really? There's a game called Mr. Nutz? Well, I shouldn't be surprised. After all, there's a game called Balls out there. But you know, looking at that cover, I think it needs something. That's more fitting.
After Ocean France closed, Philippe de Soleil and Pierre Adain decided to work independently on a platform game for the Amiga, a computer operating system that only a handful of people knew about, and still only a handful of people know about it. They showed it to Ocean Software, and the game was then made for the Genesis and SNES, because it was harder to copy console games, and at the time, console gaming was more profitable. And the original design for Mr. Nutz was supposed to be a more Disney style, as evident from the in-game sprite work, but then changed it to make the character more cool looking instead of cute. Gee, I wonder who he looks like.
Originally the title was Squirrel's Game, but then they changed it to Mr. Nutz later in development. But then they changed the S to a Z because it was deemed too pejorative. But does it really matter? After all, the first world is called Woodyland. And you know, I don't get that. They did that with Balls. If the name is too pejorative, changing an S to a Z doesn't change the pronunciation.
There was 5 different versions of this game: SNES, Genesis, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. They wanted to spread this game around like the herpes that it is. And this is the Genesis version. Oh wait, I mean the Mega Drive, because this version didn't come to America.
And I know that there's going to be someone out there that's going to go, "Oh my god, what about the SNES version?" That version is fine. I tested it, and it does not have any of the flaws that I'm about to get into.
Now, graphically, this game is amazing, especially for the Genesis, and the animation is astounding and very fluid. The music and sound effects are crap, and that's the best way I can describe it. There's a story to this too. The main bad guy, Mr. Blizzard, wants to usher in a new ice age, and Mr. Nutz has to stop him. And I can't believe that I had to refer to these characters by such ridiculous and silly names. You can jump and throw acorns that you collect. Apparently you can attack with your tail, but you can't in either console version unless there's some button combination that I don't know or didn't figure out.
And if that's the case, that would put the controls up there with Bebe's kids.
There's 6 worlds, and each world is broken up into journeys. And before you enter a new world, you get a map which looks surprisingly like the one from Super Ghouls and Ghosts.
The gameplay is basic platforming, but unfortunately it's not that basic because of the game-breaking physics and controls.
Moving the squirrel, and I'm not using the name Mr. Nutz, is very loose, and combined with a slippery and floaty physics, it's a perfect storm of fail. When you let go of the D-pad, you slide across the ground before stopping, and the same sliding effect happens when you go to turn around. When you're in the air, it feels like you're floating, and it makes it very hard to land on your target because of the loose controls. So you're going to either completely miss your jump, or you're going to come up short. And either way, it's not going to be a good result for you. The collision detection is somewhat off. You can land on an enemy yet still take damage, just because you didn't land dead center on them. Other times, it's completely normal. And there's just way too many enemies on screen, so you're definitely going to be taking some damage.
Strangely, it's like these enemies come in waves, so you better have your jumping skills in order, and given this game's controls, you won't. So you better make sure you have plenty of acorns in stock. Oh, wait a minute, that's not going to work either, because there's a lot of enemies that are way too low to the ground for you to hit them with your nuts.
The ground enemy AI is rather brainless, either walking back and forth with no regards to where you are, or just walking straight ahead. There are some things that pop out in response to you approaching, but you'll more than likely take damage before you get to respond. Flying enemies are going to be the bane of your existence. They always fly in from the side and will reroute their trajectory as you move up and down. So you'll be lucky if you manage to kill them without taking damage. Each journey is pretty long too, and there's no checkpoints. So if you die, it's back to the beginning of the section and the enemies respawn, and it doesn't help when the stages become more of a maze rather than a simple left to right level.
I would say that this game is simply trial and error, but it's not. Trial and error implies that once you get something wrong, you know how to avoid it. But how can you avoid floaty, slippery physics that are an ever-present danger in this game?
There's a password system too, and they're very juvenile passwords, like Casper and pizzas. And you can't hold the directional pad down to scroll through the letters. You have to press it every single time that you want to change the letter. If you're holding the jump button while you land on an enemy, you'll be able to bounce off of them and able to reach higher places. That's if you can maneuver yourself in the air correctly without taking damage.
And probably one of the more annoying things is when you start a journey, the title of the level shows up, but what you have to do is actually hit a button so you can continue. So if you're used to games like Mario and Sonic that after the level title automatically start, you're going to think that this game's locked up.
There's coins scattered across the levels, and for every 50 that you collect, 1 hit point is replenished. At first there's barely any coins, and then later on, the game just literally throws them at you. You can find 1-ups throughout the levels, but they're so well hidden that they might as well not be there at all.
As it stands, Mr. Nutz is a trash game. It's barely playable, but if you actually have to try playing with this screwball squirrel, you might as well do it on the Super Nintendo because it's not going to hurt as much.